and then you crash. You get a real big piece of humble pie, and you realize that I wasn't doing that for Christ, I was doing that for myself. I wasn't doing that for his glory, I was doing it for mine. Hi, I'm Father Gary, and this is Armed with Faith. Thrilled to be with you again. I want to talk today about Saint John of the Ladder, Saint John Climacus, and what he says about the spiritual life. Saint John of the Ladder wrote a book with 30 steps in which a monk is to use to attain enlightenment, to attain spiritual purity, to attain what we call theosis in the Orthodox Church, pure, to become like God. I think that the first two steps are really important for us to realize, and then to look at the last step as well. If you ever look at an icon of Saint John of Climacus and his ladder, you'll notice that there's a ladder, looks like Jacob's ladder, and you've got monks climbing up that ladder. They've got their beards, their robes, they're climbing up the ladder. And in that icon, near the top, there's one guy who's just about to get there. He's right there, really just about to get there, and there's a demon that's got him by the foot. And just makes me think when I see that icon that no matter how hard we try, the devil's going to try harder. No matter how much effort we put into it, the devil's going to make it that much harder for us. I think that the imagery and the symbolism of the ladder gives us the opportunity to realize that the struggle never stops, right? And I think that in life, we want the struggle to stop. We want there to be vacation, right? We want there to be an easy time. We are born and we go to school and we get recess, right? And now it's time to stop thinking and just play. And in life, the devil doesn't work like that. And in life, the devil doesn't stop. And in the Christian life, the more that we're focused on Christ, the more that we've got our eyes set on him, the easier it is to follow him, right? That we put our blinders on and we just look here. We're not going to be distracted by all the things that come in our way. And that's what St. John of the Ladder is wanting us to do. He wants us to just put our blinders on and to look at Christ. Even Christ says that, right? And so when we live a life like that, and look, I need to make it absolutely clear that I struggle with this as well. Like I haven't found, I'm not standing on that top rung, right? I'm like up and down and falling, and the demons have got both my feet and pulling me, and I'm struggling and fighting it all the way. So I'm not speaking from like advancement. I'm speaking from, I'm in the ring. I'm fighting with you, right? And so it's important to realize and understand that this is a good fight. It's worth it. Right? It's worth the opportunity to struggle and to make it real in our lives so that we feel the peace of God come within us and that we realize that we let go of all those things that hold us back. And so in the life of Christ that we have to take up and endure as Christians is a difficult one. And it's hard for us to realize that if we don't realize some of the steps that St. John of the Ladder introduces to us in our lives. The first step that he talks about is renunciation of the world. Renunciation of the world, to put the world behind us, to put it away, to detach ourselves. And actually, detachment is the second step. So renunciation and detachment are the first two steps. And what is it that we're renouncing? We're renouncing the way of the world. We're renouncing the leader of this world, which is the evil one. And we're turning ourselves towards Christ. And detachment and renunciation are letting go of things that hold us back. A lot of times there are things that hold us back, that keep us from a life in Christ because we want to hold on to something that might just make us drown. There's a wonderful story about an African tribe and how they catch monkeys. There were monkeys that were raiding their village and they needed to catch the monkeys. So what they did was they cut a little hole in a coconut, just enough for the monkey to put their hand in. And in the coconut, they put berries and fruit that the monkeys wanted. And the monkeys would stick their hand into the coconut and they would grab the fruit and the berries. And as they tried to get their hand out, they couldn't get their hand out because their hand was in a fisted clinch, right? Holding on to that stuff. They couldn't get their hand out. And they couldn't get their hand out meant what? Their hand was stuck in a coconut, and they couldn't use the hand to get away. And the hunters easily caught them. It was a piece of cake to catch these monkeys. And if the monkeys just knew to let go of that food that was in there and slide their hand out, they would go. How often are we that monkey that sticks our hand in that coconut and grabs it and just want to hold on to it? And it makes us trip, it makes us stutter, it makes us fall over. And the devil one gets his hands on us and puts us in a snare. If we start to let go of those things, think about all the things that we're holding on to, that if we just let go, how much more free we would be inside, the freedom we would live with. We think about the things that hold our hearts captive. It could be greed, jealousy, sometimes even the lack of forgiveness holds our heart in contempt, and we're in our own self-inflicted prison that we can't get out of. Taking a step on that rung, that first rung of that ladder, is a determination to step above it all, to start to rise, to start to grow, to start to give ourselves to a path of living towards Christ. As we're ascending the ladder, and the exercise is climbing the ladder, and we keep our eye on Christ, right? And the more we keep our eye on Christ, and the more we ascend that ladder, and ascend that ladder, and ascend that ladder, it's when we take our eyes off of him that we sink. Right? And if you think about Peter in the boat and the storm, right? The other disciples say, we thought we saw a ghost. And Peter says, if you're God, let me come to you. And he says, come. And he takes a step out of the boat and he starts walking on water. And as soon as he realizes he's walking on water and fears, he starts to sink, right? He takes his eyes off Christ. You take your eyes off Christ, you're going to sink. And so that's part of the struggle, is keeping your eyes right there on it. You know, Cal Ripken Jr., here I am putting baseball into it, but Cal Ripken Jr. said it best when somebody asked him, how do you hit a baseball? He said, you keep your eye on it. Keep your eye on the ball. And you got to watch it, right? And so, you know, the good Christian keeps his eye on Christ, is focused there, and doesn't take his eyes off of him. And he's like looking at Christ and like realizing that you are my priority. You are my everything. And what is it that I need to do to get closer to you? And when we do that and we open our hearts, life becomes a little bit less difficult. I used to say easier, but nothing's easy. It's just less difficult, right? Life is hard. And one of my favorite books, The Road Less Traveled, right, by Peck, the very first line is all you really need to read. Once you read that line, the book kind of can be summarized in that first line. And the first line of the book is, life is difficult, and once you realize it, it becomes less difficult. So, you know, when we take our eyes off of Christ and we're pointing at other people and we start judging other people and we're pointing around, right? My grandmother used to say, when you're pointing at somebody else, when you're trying to point somebody else's errors out, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you. How often do we have that self-awareness to realize that as I'm judging you and judging you and judging you and judging all these people around me, that I'm not focused on Christ? Because I'm looking at your deficiencies. And what does Christ say when we start to judge other people? He says, take the log out of your own eye, right? Become self-aware. I think that with Saint John of the Ladder, what's important to understand is that it's an opportunity to build our self-awareness, and how often we fall into narcissism, right? And how often we think it's all about me. And the life of Christ, living towards Christ and building ourselves in that spiritual battle, is living for Christ, living for our brothers, living for our sisters, right? Love God with all your mind, your heart, and your soul, and love your neighbor as you would yourself. You have to love yourself, but you love your neighbor as much as you love yourself, right? So we stop judging. We stop taking our eyes off of Christ and looking at everybody else's deficiencies, and we just look at Christ and worry about what we have to do to get on that next step. We're going to climb that ladder, but it's when you start thinking that I'm great, man, I'm doing great on this ladder, that you're going to slip right off and fall off. I've done that, you know, that I think that I'm doing something. I'm great, man, this is awesome, I'm the best at this, I'm great at this, oh, I'm so fantastic. And then you crash. You get a real big piece of humble pie. And you realize that I wasn't doing that for Christ, I was doing that for myself. I wasn't doing that for his glory, I was doing it for mine. And that's when the demons come and get us. And that's when we have to be very, very careful with our life in Christ. and to dedicate everything that we do to Him and how He's glorified in those things.